Lockdown Tower is a brand new 2023. It says 2022 on IMDb, but that's because of its French release. But here in the States, with us peasants, we got it in 2023, just recently on Shudder. Now, this is a French film, and we went into this blind, which I definitely recommend doing. So I'll hold the synopsis for now. But if you need to be sold on it after, I'll tell you what it is. But yeah, okay. First thing, this is definitely a good movie, but like, it is a downer and a half. The horror is definitely there for sure.
Yeah.
It's always like looming, right?
Like an imminent.
But this turns more into like a survival prison film more so than like they don't really focus on what is the horror which we would consider horror, but that does not make anything in this film less horrific while it's happening, because the actions of humans are more horrific than anything we can fathom and create with monsters and supernatural elements and whatever. Humans always really are the scariest element to any horror movie when done, more accurately.
Yeah. There's definitely an aspect of this film that is very interesting and doesn't involve humans, which we were both really into the concept of. But yeah, everybody in this film is scary because they're trying to survive.
Yeah. So, and lastly, before we give a plot synopsis for those who want to stick around for that, then we can actually talk about more of the film, but I can't until I say a plot synopsis. But the last thing I'll say before I say that, just to avoid any kind of like mild spoilers for the plot, because I think going into this blind like we did, and when it reveals itself, you're like, oh shit! Like,
yeah, it was a really cool and impactful reveal.
It definitely is the like most terrible situation you could basically find yourself in. I cannot think of a worse fate than what these people suffer. This is horror at its deepest, darkest level, right? So even if there isn't like traditional horror stuff going on all the time, this is the scariest premise. And whether or not it's fully utilized to its potential, not in a horror sense, but I think from a story sense of what they were going for, I think, yeah, it was. I just think there's so many different ways to explore this concept. But anyway, the last thing, as I said, I got to get to it, is if you are sensitive to animal abuse, whew, man, this is a rough one for that.
Yes, a big trigger warning for that. There was definitely a lot of this film that I was extremely uncomfortable watching because of that.
But in the situation, it does make sense.
It does.
No matter how much, it
doesn't
sucks.
make it easy.
No, not at all.
Just because it can be justified.
Yeah. So, okay. If you want a plot synopsis, here we go. So we very early on are introduced to our horror element, which is these people are in a apartment building, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, outside is just gone. And when I say gone, I mean there is a black cloud of like what looks like almost thick smog. It's just blackness, just thick black smoke. And it's at the windows, it's at the doors, it's everywhere. There's literally no place you can go and open up something and it not go into that. And when anyone tries to put anything through it, whether it's you know, an article, an item, doesn't matter. It evaporates the second it hits it, including living things.
Yeah.
So you cannot escape this place. So now that we can talk more about that premise, we follow all the inhabitants, all the residents of this building, and the level to which this devolves into.
Mm-hmm.
The time that we spend there. I'm not going to talk too much on that because I want you guys to experience that. The thing I will say that I was really appreciative of in this film was how, not only how horrible everyone became, but how horrible they looked. This is something that I don't feel is properly done in movies and TV shows, because even with something like The Last of Us or something where you're in this post-apocalyptic world, now in that world, of course, you have more area and you have more resources and whatnot. But they still have, like, Joel still has sex appeal, right? He's still attractive. He still looks like, he just looks like a rugged mountain man. This looks like they turn into things from the fucking Descent, basically. I mean, which is so realistic.
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And it is very realistic for the situation that they're in. So it's like, it's not a romanticized version of like some apocalyptic world or scenario.
Yeah. The performances in this are great. The film is super well shot. I think the writing is all very good. We also, when I talked about the prison stuff, that's what it feels like more than anything. This feels like a prison movie where all the guards have left and there's no escape from the prison. And it's basically everything becomes a resource.
Yeah.
Everything becomes like anything can be of value, right? And also people are very tribal and they immediately like latch onto and are drawn to others like them, right?
Yeah.
So this very much devolves into segregation, and it's one of those movies you watch and you feel so terrible the whole time you're watching it, because you're reminded of how awful humans really can become when they're put at odds. That is the scariest thing to me.
This film, it's not similar in premise in any way, but it gave me the same like taste in my mouth that God is a Bullet did.
Oh,
where
very cynical.
Yeah, it's a very cynical film.
Yeah.
And really sad.
There's literally no levity.
None.
No hope.
None. It's so bleak and so dark.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a downer. It's a huge downer.
Oh my God, the last story lines of the movie is as depressing as the rest of the movie.
Yes.
Right? And it just kind of ends on this super low note, and it fades or cuts to black, and you're just kind of like, oh my God, I just want to throw myself into the black dust mist freaking guard. Like it's not a fun watch for sure. I did like it, but I can't say that like typically I'm like, oh, I was entertained, or like I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy this movie. I really enjoyed the premise. Like I was into the premise so heavily. But it became such a different film than I was expecting.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I don't know. I mean, I guess I liked the movie, but I didn't really like it.
I get that.
It's like it's the same thing. I feel like comparing it again to God is a Bullet. Like I really disliked that film, and this one, I think the only thing that's like saving it for me is that it has such a cool premise.
Yeah.
To start with, like that is super fascinating, but everything just gets. And it's not even that it's dark, because obviously we watch a lot of dark things, but it is the cynicism, I think,
Yeah.
that is hard for me to watch. And also the animal abuse. I really am not a fan of seeing that in films, like, ever.
My biggest gripe with the film by far and away, because the film does really all the film is when it really comes down to it. I talked about prison, but I think what I would liken it to the most is like an island survival film. When a bunch of people get trapped on an island, resources are limited, people are scared, any of those kinds of movies. You can fill in the blank. Post-apocalyptic, they get trapped in an area and they have to survive off the resources they have. People pick sides, they fight with one another, gangs and alliances are created and that kind of stuff. And so this film has a very harsh look at all of the sins of man, whether it's drug addiction, people who gravitate towards religion for answers and do terrible things in the name of racism, segregation, like all of the darkest parts of humanity are in here. So it does all that stuff really well. And it's as we said, it is such an ugly movie. But the thing that I really did get like disappointed with, and my gripe of the film, is that you have this really amazing premise. And I feel like it kind of just became another survival film where the doors might as well have just been locked, right? And anytime people had to walk outside, they get shot the second they walk out or something, right? The premise didn't really do a lot for the film as far as like what drove the plot. And for me, something like this, I would have liked there to be much more focus on what is happening outside and let's get outside, and the mystery and the intrigue of like what's happening, how do we get out of this. There's a lot of films like this that I've watched where people are stuck in these impossible situations, whether it's like Cube or Triangle or Coherence or whatever, where they're stuck in these like they're unreality, right? There's nothing that you can use as a grounding tool to try to figure your way out. It's like, no, reality no longer is applicable here.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's such a wealth of avenues to explore with that, and I just feel like we never did that, and that's not the film's fault. This film did what it wanted to do, and I think it does it well, even if it is a dredge to sit through. But my own personal tastes, I would have wanted them to explore their really great premise more. And I don't feel like that's properly utilized. And I would love to see another film like this, which we've kind of seen stuff like this. It has a similar-ish presence because this movie has like zero exposition or anything. Like, they never discuss what's going on. You kind of have to fill in the blanks with everything. When there's time jumps and when there's things that are changed in their world, you're just kind of trying to catch up. And there's things going on with the religious aspects that both of us were like looking at each other like confused. Any idea what's going on?
Yeah.
So the film does not hold your hand in any way, shape, or form. And that's okay. If I look at movies that did something similar, like await further instructions, or something, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about that film because it is a very similar idea in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's like explanations that are given throughout, and also I feel like the characters themselves care more about finding out like what's happening. And that's not, it didn't feel like that was the case at all with this one. Like, it just is like they accept their fate.
Yeah, exactly. And if I was to compare a movie that does that right in the way that I was talking about, I would take something like The Platform, right? Where it's a very similar film. People are trapped in liminal space, and there's very limited resources, and they're constantly pitted against each other for resources, but there's always a focus on how do we beat this? How do we get out of here? Like The Mill recently on Hulu that we just watched, or plenty of films. Cube, doesn't matter. There's always this quest to try to figure out a way out, to try to focus on the why and the where. And in one way, I kind of commend the film for not going the traditional route. So I do think it's a good movie. I wanted something different.
Yeah.
But I'm still very intrigued by what I got, and I am like fascinated by the world and the people within it. And I guess I'm just kind of at the end of the day thinking about, would this really be how it became? And unfortunately, I think this is very realistic. And that's the scariest part of the movie to me.
Yeah. Terrifying for sure.
So, I mean, that's about as much as we can say spoiler free. It was a long one, but yeah, I said most of everything I wanted to say anyway. We deal with literally every dark part of humanity, drug addiction, all of it. It's all here. So, as you said, it is a super nihilistic, cynical ass film.
Yeah.
And it is not fun. And there's animal abuse like crazy. And so, not fun.
No.
Not a good time, but recommended for those who are into, the million things we just said.
Yeah.
So, I'm a higher on it than she is, for sure. And I get it. I totally understand why someone wouldn't like this movie, for sure. But there's something about it that's so intriguing to me. Even if it wasn't done in the way I wish it would have been, I'm still fascinated by it. So it got my attention. That's for sure. Never lost it. But if you're looking for resolution, look elsewhere.
Yes, definitely look elsewhere.
All right. That's it, guys. All right. Let us know if you watch it. It's on Shudder. Subscribe to the channel.
Yeah.
I'm not asking. I'm telling you.
Tell him.
We put in so much work this month alone, man. I feel like if you're into horror, you should be subscribed.
Yeah.
Straight up. That's it. All right, guys.
Bye.